In 1996, Bill Gates said, "Content is king." And boy, was he right. 3 decades later, it still occupies the throne. For lawyers, law firms, and companies serving the legal industry, content marketing and thought leadership marketing are a must if they want to build their books of business or increase their revenues. Hi, I'm Wayne Pollock. I'm a former AM Law 50 senior associate who discovered the world of content marketing and thought leadership marketing and hasn't looked back. In each episode of this podcast, I interview lawyers and legal industry in-house marketers who are doing big things with their content marketing and thought leadership marketing. This is Legally Contented. Welcome to episode number 13 of Legally Contented. I'm your host, Wayne Pollock. This is another special Legally Contented Lowdown episode. This is just me and you, no guests. We're going to be recapping the most recent 5 episodes, episodes 8 through 12, and then talking about the takeaways from those 5 episodes. As a reminder, this podcast exists for 2 reasons. The first is to spotlight the lawyers, law firms, and companies serving the legal industry who are doing big things with content marketing and thought leadership marketing. But it's also to educate lawyers and in-house marketers within the legal industry about content marketing and thought leadership marketing, specifically these best practices that our guests show day in and day out by consistently producing interesting and compelling content marketing and thought leadership marketing. All right, so let's get going with our recap here. Episode 8 was Mitch Jackson. Mitch is a personal injury attorney in Orange County, California. He and I go back about 5 years. You may have heard in that episode him make some references to us getting together. But we met a couple years ago, and he is standing on the leading edge of the intersection of law and marketing and technology. He was an early adopter of social media. He's got about 45,000 Twitter followers, about 13,000 Instagram followers, 3,500 YouTube subscribers, and about 4,000 followers on LinkedIn. He has always been at the cutting edge of technology and marketing because he started in a very crowded market in Southern California as a personal injury attorney, and he really had to build his personal brand. And that's what we covered in the first half of the episode. We talked in the first half about his personal branding efforts and how he went about building his personal brand, building a name for himself. We talked about how to build a personal brand and why doing so is so important even today with all the noise out there on social media and the internet, and the importance of being yourself. And then we talked in the second half of the conversation about Web3 technology, basics about Web3 like cryptocurrency, especially the metaverse. We spent most of our time in Web3 talking about the metaverse. Mitch gave some platforms he suggested we check out, like spatial.io, engagevr.io, and glue.work. We talked about how it might change life and certainly the practice of law. We talked about how right now the metaverse for corporate lawyers is about a place to meet people as opposed to discovering people. Think of it more of like a Zoom meeting where you're going to be talking with someone that you already know or who you're hoping to know, as opposed to a networking event where you are bumping into people and meeting with them for the first time. All right, here's the first clip we're going to listen to from Mitch's episode. And in this clip, Mitch talks about the importance of being yourself and building a brand.
Well, before the internet rolled out, Wayne, what I noticed is I also rode and raced motocross back then in Southern California. I rode and raced for 38 years. I had a couple of friends who I met down at the courthouse who also were ex-racers. And so we got together and we started riding on Wednesdays together down to local tracks. Within a couple of months, we had 8 or 10 of us riding every Wednesday morning. 1 or 2 judges, believe it or not, were joining us on Wednesdays when they could. They'd start their courtrooms late. And all of a sudden, I noticed my brand building. I noticed the number of referrals increasing. It's because I realized I was doing something different. We've got a group of lawyers riding and racing motocross who all get each other. We're all passionate about this hobby, this interest. And now we're all referring cases to each other. We're having dinner. We're watching the games together down at the local watering hole. And it clicked for me. I'm like, wait a minute, why should I try to blend in with everyone else in Orange County when I've got this great group of lawyers that we enjoy riding and racing together? We're building our businesses together. And guess what? Other lawyers on the outside wanted to be in our group. They wanted to learn how to ride. They wanted to come down to the track with us. And so taking that mindset onto social media, what I quickly learned is that by being you, by sharing your hobbies, your interests, your passions on the digital platforms through photos, through videos, like you've described earlier, what I realized is it works, and it works really well. Once I gave myself permission to be myself, I started connecting with other people who had similar interests. I started connecting with other families who also had kids in sports. I started connecting with other young lawyers that were trying to build their practice, who enjoyed running or flying gliders or flying drones, whatever it might be. And so what I noticed, Wayne, was by being real, it allowed me to build my brand and substantially increase the number of referrals, number of business opportunities, whether it's speaking, traveling, investing, whatever it might be. It actually opened up many, many doors. Now, having said that, you can't be someone to everyone. And so I'm sure there are people out there where when they see my social posts, they say to themselves or their company executives, that's not the lawyer for our company. But you know what? That's fine. There's plenty of business out there. And I'd rather represent and engage with people on a daily basis as clients who actually enjoy doing the same things that I'm doing, who actually have the same mindset.
That's crazy, right? Riding motocross with other lawyers and judges. But Mitch really explains why you need to be real and connect with other people who have interests that you have, people who share your hobbies. And today, as opposed to the mid 80s, when we're talking about Mitch doing this in the early 90s, today is so much easier online to find people who share your hobbies, who share your interests, and hopefully you find people nearby who have similar hobbies and interests to you, so you can build those relationships. Okay, now turning to Web3 and the metaverse. In this clip, Mitch gives a pretty cool description of a meeting he had in the metaverse.
The play right now is for us to initiate the interaction with a potential client, for example, in our virtual space. That's the way Web3 and the metaverse is working best for us right now. There's no randomness at all associated with our metaverse activity. It's focused, it's intentional. Give you an example. It rained here in Southern California to the point where bumper to bumper traffic. We had 4 clients coming down from Los Angeles to Orange County to the firm, which is normally a 45-minute drive. And I think according to Waze, it was going to be like 3.5 to 4 hours. So everybody wanted to reschedule or jump on the phone, what have you. 2 of these potential clients were tech clients. And so I had my team reach out and say, listen, if you'd like, we can jump on a Zoom or a phone call, whatever works for you. But in December of 2021, we rolled out a new virtual conference room. If you'd like to meet Mitch there, we can do that. And that's what they chose to do. So I met 2 new potential tech clients, separate meetings in the virtual conference space. We're avatars in a room, and it looks like me. Engage VR and Spatial both allow us to take our webcam or a photo from our phone or our desktop, and it takes your face and it integrates it using AI onto the avatar body. My avatar body looks like a lawyer in a suit. I don't think I have a tie, open shirt, but it's a professional type of initial interaction. So if you see me online, you know what I look like. You're going to know who I am when we meet down in a deposition or the courthouse. It's a very intimate experience. But anyway, 60 seconds into this intentional meeting that we set up, the potential client said, Mitch, stop talking. You're our guy. This is the firm we want to hire to represent our company in this high profile litigation matter. Now, before they came in, we took about 5 minutes, and that's all it took, was to take their logo in one of their promotional videos and click and add them to our conference room space. So when they show up in the conference room, they look over on one wall and there's their logo. Okay. They look on the other wall and here's a YouTube video that's showing their latest product rollout. It's a public video. They've got me standing there, and we're sitting across a beautiful conference table with 2 laptop screens in front of us that I can walk them through retainer agreements or anything else is applicable to the case. It was done with intent. It was done to personalize the experience. It was done in a free conference room that took us 5 to 10 minutes to set up. That's a beautiful thing. And the reason I appreciate it so much is I was that guy back in the day where we were spending thousands of dollars a month to keep our law library updated, to do our marketing and advertising. I think it was 15 to 20 grand a month for a small firm when it comes to employees and overhead and all this kind of stuff. And now I just created a much more professional, interesting, unique initial interaction with the client, doing what I just described in 10 minutes in a free platform. And that just blows me away. And that's why I'm so excited about this stuff.
I told you that was pretty cool, right? Imagine your clients coming in to a metaverse meeting room and seeing their logos on the screens, or videos of them that they produced on the screens, or virtual versions of their products in the meeting room. That is so cool. And by the way, you're not going to hear this clip, but I suggest you go to that episode number 8, and check out where Mitch talks about a meeting he had on a yacht in the metaverse. You'll have to check that one out yourself. The last clip we'll hear from Mitch's episode is Mitch talking about the bigger picture takeaways of Web3 and what it means for life and the law.
So I see both of those technologies completely changing the legal industry moving forward. Blockchain, for people that aren't aware of what a blockchain is, it's an immutable ledger that facilitates the process of recording transactions and tracking assets. So in the legal profession, whether it's discovery, or the way the courts are processing legal pleadings, the way we're exchanging discovery, jury instructions, any asset, any issue in a legal case can be placed on the blockchain and preserved. Okay, so there's no question as to what it is or what exactly happened. And when you incorporate smart contracts to do all the above, you're allowing code to facilitate, make more efficient and less expensive, in a faster way, handle all of the above. So Wayne, what I see happening is blockchain technology along with smart contracts are going to change how we practice law, how we keep track of important legal events, ownership interest, and also in the real estate world when it comes to escrow agreements and titles to property. Any type of digital asset can be tracked, can be recorded, can be protected on the blockchain. So as a lawyer, there's going to be a point in time where when a client wants to protect a certain type of asset that has a digital component to it, if you don't recommend that they use blockchain and smart contract technology to do so, down the road, it's going to be malpractice. And so I think it's really important, and we're talking down the road, okay? I don't want everybody to get worried about this, but maybe 10, 20 years down the road, this is something that's going to be the foundation to what we're doing. You're not even going to be thinking about blockchain or smart contracts. It's going to be the underlying foundation to everything we do. And so it's a good idea for people to kind of get up to speed on this technology right now, for two reasons. Number one, baby steps. The more you know, the better you'll come across to third parties, including clients. Number two, as you incorporate these technologies into your practice, into your client services, you'll get better results, it will cost less, and you'll have happier clients. So yeah, it's an exciting time. Whether or not people are keen on decentralized technologies in Web3, I get that. There are downsides to everything we're talking about: accountability, jurisdiction issues, who's really behind a decentralized autonomous organization. Do you really want to be a part of a DAO when you don't know all the players in that DAO? But I think from a lawyer's perspective, whether you're doing intellectual property, whether you're doing contract law, litigation law, I think there's never been a greater opportunity for law firms to expand their client services, to incorporate all these technologies, to build out their business, because this is there's a reason why every single Fortune 1000 company is looking at one or more elements of Web3. There's a reason why investment firms and some of the largest private and public corporations in the world, those that aren't even on the Fortune 500 or 1000, are building out Web3 technologies and spending billions of dollars to do so. And I think it's really smart that we pay attention to what they're doing, even if we don't like what they're doing. I'd rather be out paddleboarding with my family than all of us spending 6 hours in the metaverse together. I get the downside to all of this, but the reality is, from a business perspective, this is here. It's growing faster than anything I've ever experienced in 40 years of being in business. And I think it's foolish for anyone to bury their head in the sand and pretend like this doesn't have significance moving forward as a society. So it's an exciting time to be alive. It's a great time to be a lawyer.
Can you tell that he's excited? The fact that he said that this is growing faster than anything he's seen in 40 years of being in business, and that includes the internet, that includes social media, it really gives you pause. And I would suggest that you check out the entire episode. If you are curious about Web3, in the episode, Mitch leaves us toward the end with some resources that he thinks lawyers should check out if they're interested in getting up to speed on Web3 and the metaverse. All right, so to me, there's two main takeaways from Mitch's conversation. One is be yourself in your marketing, that you've got to stand out from the pack. And the way to stand out from the pack is just to be yourself and find interests and hobbies that you feel comfortable sharing with the world. It is so different than how most lawyers think about content marketing and thought leadership marketing and putting themselves out there. But you have to build a personal brand. It is too competitive in any corner of the legal industry. So be yourself in your marketing and stand out from the pack by being a bit more transparent and showing people the real you. The other takeaway for right now, stay abreast of Web3. You don't have to dive all in. You don't have to start buying property in the metaverse or buying cryptocurrency, but don't be so quick to poo-poo the metaverse and Web3. Take some time now, as it's early on, do occasional reading, sign up for an email newsletter or two from companies that are in Web3, or find media outlets that cover Web3, and give yourself a chance to get educated. We all remember how the internet and social media came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden, it was just a part of our lives. Well, there's a pretty good chance that Web3 and the metaverse might do the same thing. So let's be cognizant of it, and let's just stay abreast of it right now without having to go all in at this early juncture. Turning to episode number 9 with Sarah Sawyer. Sarah is a principal at Offutt Kerman. Offutt Kerman is an entrepreneurial and fast-growing AmLaw 200 firm based in Baltimore and primarily centered on the East Coast. Kind of similar to what I talked about with Mitch, our conversation was all about building a personal brand. Now, this conversation was different with Sarah because Sarah is an AmLaw 200 principal. She's not a personal injury attorney, so she's got a different view of the world and she's working with different clients. And let's be honest, as you hear in the episode with her, she has a little bit of a head start. I mean, she has a last name that rhymes with lawyer, on which she built her brand, Sawyer the Lawyer. So yeah, it's always nice to have that start when it comes to marketing and business development. We talked about the importance of building a brand early on in your career and how to do it intentionally. If you check out the Sawyer the Lawyer website, which is linked to in the episode notes for episode 9, you'll see imagery and you'll see language very different from the normal attorney bio. It's warm, it's approachable. It signals to small and medium businesses that are the clients that she's going for that she can be a partner and not intimidate them, that she is there to help them and not intimidate them. And that is obviously an intentional decision, but it is a strategic decision and not something that you're going to hear many lawyers talk about. They're going to have their photo up with a headshot on their website that is just wherever the firm says should be their headshot style. They're not thinking as strategically or as intentionally as Sarah is, and that's why I had Sarah on the podcast, because she has a lot to discuss about building your personal brand and standing out, again, from the pack. In this first clip from Sarah, we hear why she was so intentional about her branding.
When I was developing those photos and the blog, I wanted to figure out ways to make sure that my personality came through in different ways. And so whether it be through the way I write my content, whether it be from my images, I think that lawyers often get into things have to be a certain way box, right? That's kind of the nature of lawyers and the way that our brains function often because of the work that we do. I wanted to really break out of that and really say, how can my blog, everything I write, everything that I do really convey, who I am, my personality, the approachableness. How do I want my clients to feel when they work with me, and how do I put that through everything that I do? And generally the way I want them to feel is I want them to feel at ease. I want them to feel like they can have very practical conversations with me and get the answers that they need. And so a standard lawyer photo used to be, and still is in some circumstances, and attorneys sitting there with their arms crossed with the legal books behind them. It drives me crazy when I see those photos now, because first of all, no one has law book libraries anymore. It's not a real thing anymore. So it just feels disingenuous to me. I understand why that has historically been the way that people have done their photos. And depending on your area of practice, it may still be relevant, but really just trying to be relevant, approachable, but also just exude that, we're going to have practical conversations and get down to real answers for you.
How many attorneys do you know that are thinking about how their clients will feel, how they want their clients to feel when they work with them, and then reverse engineering that to build a marketing and business development strategy? It's just fascinating. And that's why, again, I had Sarah on the podcast. For this second and final clip from Sarah's episode, she gives a tip for attorneys looking to get their marketing off the ground.
I would say think big and just do it. So I think often we as attorneys, we're so much in a box. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, but really break out of that box and play around with it. Don't be afraid to get all the pieces aligned. I think as attorneys, we want to line everything up. You want to build your case. You want to make it perfect before it goes out anywhere. So sometimes it just doesn't help with progress. You just end up, I want this to be perfect. I want to have this completely thought out. And it's not to say that you just do things willy-nilly, but I would say just think big, try it out, play around with things. Some things are going to work, some things aren't. Learn from it and break that mold. Don't treat it like a case.
Pretty simple, right? 6 words: think big and just do it. As for takeaways from Sarah's episode, it's pretty clear, the big takeaway here, which is that we are all personal brands as professionals. Whether you're a lawyer, whether you're a marketer, you have reputations that you need to cultivate. And if you don't believe people like you have brands, think about other lawyers, think about other marketers inside of your law firm and out. You are going to think some thoughts about them that may or may not be true based solely on how you've interacted with them, how you see them on video, or how you've heard about them or heard them on a podcast. You have a brand and you need to cultivate your brand, and you can't leave your brand to chance. You can't leave your personal brand to chance. You've got to be intentional and you've got to be strategic. Speaking of personal brands, next up is episode 10 with Laura Frederick. There are a lot of lawyers and a lot of legal marketers out there who think that social media is just for direct-to-consumer law firms like personal injury, like criminal defense, like family law. They don't think you can build a business-to-business law firm or a business-to-business legal practice on social media. Well, my conversation with Laura should prove them wrong. Laura is a former big law attorney. She spent 14 years as a former in-house attorney at tech companies, including Tesla. And then she struck out on her own to launch a business-to-business law firm that focused on corporate contracts, which is the kind of work that she was doing in her in-house jobs. So she starts her firm and things are going well. She's receiving referrals from people within her network that she has cultivated over the course of 2 decades in the law. But she knows she has to start doing some additional marketing and business development. And what she does next literally changed her life. In August 2020, she decided to do a LinkedIn challenge where she posted every day on LinkedIn for 30 days. And what happened next was astounding. First, before I go any further, she's still posting every day. So when you hear this podcast, she is going to be still posting every day going back to August 2020. She increased her followers by 20 times. That is astounding. She increased her LinkedIn followers by 20 times. She also brought in new B2B clients each month, launched a contract training platform, published a book, and has established herself as a thought leader in the commercial contracts space. So tell me again how social media can't help a lawyer build a business-to-business legal practice? In this first clip from her episode, Laura discusses the importance of getting reps, getting shots on goal when it comes to marketing, especially content marketing and thought leadership marketing.
One of the beautiful things about posting every day is you fail fast. I've done the calculations before. If I've posted now, let's say about 600 posts in a row, if I had only posted 2 times a week, that's many years by the time I would have figured some of these things out. And posting every day, it feels overwhelming for people, but I found the habits that you build and the lessons that you learn come much faster. So for example, I started doing cartoons in the very beginning, and then I inadvertently added a couple lines of text that someone said. And immediately everyone's like, that's so awesome. That's your best cartoon yet. So I was like, oh, okay. So I started adding cartoons in the mix, but I still did provision breakdowns with little bubbles of language without a cartoon. And somebody made the comment of, that's great on one of my charts or provisions I'd broken down, but I miss your cartoon. I remember the post better when there's a cartoon. And I was like, oh, because I felt bad, like I should be giving them a chart or something more tangible to help people learn the point. But that person helped me realize, oh, actually, the cartoon helps even more than a chart because it's different. And it's also just me. It was me being who I am, which, as I said, I'm tend towards silliness. So I was able to really capture the authentic self as opposed to trying to play Laura the lawyer, very serious. This is serious stuff. Teaching you is serious stuff. And it's making it more fun.
Isn't that great? The importance of failing fast, getting rid of the bad, testing, and figuring out what works and what doesn't work. So you have an opportunity to continue to do more of what works because you've done it so often, you've published so much content, you know what doesn't work. Thus, you can focus on what seems to work. In the second clip, Laura explains the inspiration for her posts and why it's so important that if you're going to create content, especially thought leadership content, you capture your thoughts.
A lot of it, some of them were from, my day-to-day practice, that I'd have an issue that, let's say, in the US, title to goods can't transfer after delivery. It's just not allowed. And every once in a while, I'd have somebody on the other side who argues that that's not true. And so it was almost like I had a chance to explain to the world what I considered to be the right approach to drafting and negotiating these things. Although I will say, very rarely, I'm not in the school that believes there's only one way to draft things. I believe there are many different ways to draft an indemnity clause, many different ways to draft an assignment clause, and most of them are great. You don't have to have this particular word in most cases. You just have to make sure you're doing the bigger picture correctly, making sure you hit all the important points, and then being aware of which words help and hurt. So I focused on conceptually there's a delta of knowledge between what a third-year lawyer knows and what I know. And so my focus was emptying my brain with all that wisdom that I gained over those 26 years of practice and sharing with that third year who hasn't yet had those life experiences that I had. So whenever I would come across an issue in my work, either let's say I was writing the comments to the other side on a draft of a contract, I'd save that on a list. I actually had Hootsuite for a long time, and I'd just create a draft post and then I'd leave it. And then if I ever ran out of content, that was my list of topics. But most days I'll say, and even now I have another 500 or so topics ready to be written on that I just have to get to because there's so much complexity to doing commercial contracts, especially when you talk about, intellectual property, cross-border, compliance elements, and then the mix of kind of the job skills of being an in-house lawyer and negotiate, or even in law firms and how you negotiate. there's no information out there. So what I was trying to do is even the little stuff that might seem obvious to people who have been doing it a long time, I was trying to capture, almost like create this textbook on the job tasks and approaches to do the job that we do when we work with commercial contracts.
Did you catch that? 500 topics that are ready for her to write about. 500 topics. But you see the benefit there. When you niche down, you are aware of so much more nuance. You have the ability to find interesting topics, and arguably you have a never-ending list of topics to discuss because you're so far in the weeds. You have an idea of all the different factors, all the different elements that are bothering clients who need the kinds of services that you provide, and thus you have such a wealth of topics to draw from that you can use to create your content, including your thought leadership content. In this third and final clip from Laura, she talks about whether other lawyers could do what she did with her How to Contract offering, which is a part contracts class, part membership in a community of people who deal with contracts in their day-to-day work lives.
There's such a focus and a shift in our society, even from focusing just on education, once and done, you went to university, you're good, to ongoing life skill development. And so I think if the lawyers in firms focus more on how can I help the clients I want to serve, not just as their engaged attorney, as their lawyer and they're the client, but what do they need to know? What can I help them do that I know how to do? And so the biggest thing that's so important for everybody who has a niche is figure out what your clients need. And again, not just your many hundreds per hour billable service. My clients are in-house counsel. They need to know and feel more comfortable working with the contracts that are on their desk that day. And so that's always my focus, is that generosity. So anybody who's looking to fill a niche, focus in on your target clients, and then focus in on what do they really need? What information do they need? What guidance, what advice, and then give them that. It should never be about what you want to write, what you think's good. It really should focus on what does your client, potential customer, need from you, and focus on giving them that. And I think the generosity breeds generosity, and that abundance mindset, it pays off so much.
That's so key. Focusing on what your client, what your potential client needs from you, giving them that information, and knowing that generosity will breed generosity, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but over time, your generosity will pay off by clients coming to you because they know you have the goods from a knowledge and wisdom perspective to help them through whatever legal issue they're coming to you about. As far as takeaways from Laura's episode, I think obviously the clear one is you can build a business-to-business legal practice on social media. It is possible, but you've got to consistently publish the content. You can't do it once a month, can't do it once a quarter. You got to do it at least once a week and maybe multiple times a week, depending on the kind of content. But you have to get out there and get in front of your target audiences constantly to remind them of who you are and the knowledge and wisdom you have to help them deal with what they need help with in terms of business issues and legal issues. Also, one of the takeaways is that it's okay if your content isn't great. You need to get the kinks out of the system. You can't always just publish content that you think is great and that the world thinks is great. Sometimes you're going to publish content that you think is pretty good or great, and the world just sighs. Your audience just goes, okay. But the more you publish, the more you can see what works and what doesn't work, and then focus your efforts on those things that work, those pieces of content, those topics, those methods for delivering the content. You have that knowledge because you're doing it so often. You get this wonderful feedback from the marketplace, and you know where to put your efforts. And finally, you have to focus on providing your audience with the knowledge and wisdom they need from you. Be generous with that information, and your generosity will be rewarded down the road. Next up is episode 11 with Jim Hacking. Jim is an immigration attorney from St. Louis. He's also a co-founder of the Maximum Lawyer podcast and Facebook group, which is a group of lawyers who are very much dedicated to trying to be the best lawyers they can be, but also the best business people, and building law firms and building legal practices that help them live the lives they want, whether that is being in the office all day because they love to do the work, or being out with their families and kids and building structures within their firms to have employees do the work and empower the employees to lead the ship while the owners are out living life. So why talk about Jim? Well, his immigration firm's YouTube channel has more than 51,000 subscribers. 51,000 subscribers. That's more than many law firms that have billions of dollars in revenue and that have armies of marketers and BD folks that outnumber the number of attorneys and staff Jim has at his firm. In this episode, it was all about marketing mindsets and how to use video to grow a legal practice. We talked about Jim's process for shooting videos, how his first videos weren't great, but they're still up there. You can go on YouTube, you can sort by when his videos were published, and you can see they might not be great, but he got into a rhythm. But like Laura, when he got those reps in, his videos got better and better. We also discussed how to apply a video strategy to a B2B legal practice, like, for example, FDA regulation. In this first clip from Jim's episode, I asked Jim about the role his YouTube videos have played in marketing. It's one thing to get views, but were these views and these subscribers translating to clients?
The first thing was an overnight comment. Oh my gosh, somebody was watching my video while I was asleep. Then the next one was, oh my gosh, someone called the office because they saw my YouTube video. The biggest thing is to get someone to raise their hand and to say, I'm considering hiring you, right? Then the next one was when somebody actually hired us. And then after that, then what happened, Wayne, is people started flying to St. Louis to meet with me, even though there were immigration lawyers in Dallas and in Denver. I remember those were sort of the two of the earlier ones. Wow. Where people came all that when one drove and one flew. So I was like, wow, that's crazy. And so at first, Wayne, for a long, long time, I thought that the magic of YouTube was to get them to raise their hand. And it does do that. But the real value, the real power of YouTube, it's the same as this podcast for you. And that is that when you listen to someone in your ear over and over and over again, that you start to realize who they really are. Like your personality will come through. When you have this podcast going for a couple of years, your personality will come through. So people really come to know you. And I mean, know you. People now know the things that piss me off at immigration. They know what I'm going to say. There's people that predict what I'm going to say sometimes on videos and things. So I think that really, really, really sort of just comes through, is that when you build that relationship, it's an asynchronous relationship, but they feel like they know you, even though you've never met them. So when I would walk into these rooms, I'd walk into a consult, people would jump up and say, oh my God, it's Mr. Jim. I can't believe it. Like I was a movie star, right? And they'll go, I watched all your videos. All of them? Yeah, all of your videos. I watch every single one. I mean, and it's just, it's free.
I think Jim's answer here is really instructive. It's not just about getting people to contact you through your content. It's about getting people to think they know you, to have an asynchronous relationship that puts you closer to people than your competitors. Maybe you're going to do it through your videos, maybe through your blogs and articles, or maybe through a podcast like this, but building a relationship with people that gives you a head start over your competitors. So when those people need someone like you, they come to you because they know you, they feel like they are already in a relationship with you, and it's very easy to move to retaining you versus a competitor who they have no idea about and have never interacted with, even though that interaction, of course, is one way, with them simply viewing and consuming your content. In the second clip, I asked Jim about whether him casting USCIS, which is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, as a villain in his videos was a problem. If you look at his videos, he really hammers USCIS because so many of his clients are going up against USCIS for their immigration issues. And here is what Jim said.
Seth Godin and Dan Kennedy, two marketing geniuses, taught me that if you try to be pleasing to everybody, then you won't make a difference. No one will notice you. No one will stand out. So I had to make a conscious decision to stick my finger in the eye of USCIS and those who hate immigrants. And I think of those as two different groups. So like I had to recognize that there's 30-40% of America that's going to hate my content. And I take a different approach with USCIS. So my videos, while combative, are in line with my approach. I have sued USCIS or the State Department over 1,000 times. It's my favorite thing. I don't go there asking for favors. I kick them in the teeth and I let the chips fall where they may. And I don't say that with any kind of bravado. But I did have those concerns, right? And so one day, I'll just tell you a quick story. One day I was in New York. This was probably about 4 years into the YouTube channel. I was in Manhattan, my first immigration case in the Big Apple. I walked all the way down from Times Square to lower Manhattan where USCIS is. And I'm like, ooh, I finally arrived. I've got this immigration case. And so it's really busy and crowded there. So I was going to meet my client in the waiting room. And this person comes running up to me and he has a lanyard around his neck with his USCIS ID. And he goes, "Are you that YouTube guy?" And I go, "Yeah." And so here, Wayne, here's my fears, your fears coming true, right? And he's like, "I just wanted to tell you that I learned how to do my job watching all your videos." So, so I laughed and laughed and I thought, boy, that's sad. That's how they're learning how to do their job, watching me. But I think that part of it is a little bit of a persona, but I do get mad and I do get worked up. So it's just me being true to myself. I was thinking to myself, and I've thought this often when you said at the beginning before we came on that sort of your audience is a lot of times sort of the bigger firms. I don't think my shtick would work with a big firm. I'd have to run it past the managing partners. I'd probably get hauled in once a month. And I've actually had 2 big law firms in St. Louis ask me to consider joining them. And I've specifically not done that because I don't want the limits on what I can say.
I realize this is going to be controversial for some lawyers, but it is okay to make enemies in your marketing. Maybe don't go after SEC or DOJ lawyers by name, but you can talk broadly about the government or the tax man. You could think about creative ways where you're not going to ruffle the feathers of the people you might be on the other side of a negotiating table with regarding cases, but you can in your marketing create an enemy that you share with your client. This enemy is hurting your clients' lives, is keeping them from being able to do what they want to do with their lives, and you ride in on the horse as the white knight because you're used to going to battle against this enemy. You've won before and you know exactly how to win again. So again, you don't have to call people out by names, but I think it's interesting for lawyers to create enemies, even if they're straw men, create enemies and go after them in your marketing in either subtle or not so subtle ways. As you can imagine, there's one takeaway from my conversation with Jim, and that is to consider video as part of your content marketing and thought leadership marketing efforts. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, gee, my competitors aren't doing any videos. Does that mean that our clients are going to be looking for videos? Like, I don't think clients really want to go on YouTube and check out videos. Just because there aren't competitors on YouTube doesn't mean they're smarter than you. It doesn't mean they figured things out. If anything, they might be afraid and they have no idea the potential for YouTube and how a lawyer or a law firm could use YouTube to build a practice, to build prominence of a lawyer or a legal practice group. The big benefit of using video as part of your content marketing efforts is that it builds a relationship between you and your audience, your clients, your referral sources, prospective, current, or past, are going to look at you and see your mannerisms and hear your voice and look at what you're wearing and feel a certain way toward you that they're not going to feel toward your competitors who don't have a presence on video and who are just communicating via the written word, if at all. And finally, this might be controversial, but I do think that lawyers, even business-to-business lawyers, can create enemies in their marketing that their clients deal with and portray themselves as fighting that common enemy, knowing the way to win, having fought them before, and positioning themselves as the white knight to come in and save their clients. And with video, you can do that really well by beating up on this common enemy through the spoken word and perhaps maybe even with interesting visuals if you chose to pursue that path. Our next and last episode in this rundown is episode 12 with Rich Meneghello. Rich is the Chief Content Officer at Fisher Phillips, a national AmLaw 200 firm with more than 400 attorneys that's primarily focused on employment law. We talk about the role that planning should play in a law firm's content marketing efforts. We talk about why it's okay for law firms to fail when testing new content marketing initiatives. And we talk about why lawyers should take positions in their marketing and business development efforts and not just sit on the fence. We talk about why it's okay for law firms to fail when testing new content marketing initiatives. We talk about why lawyers should take positions in their marketing and business development content and not just sit on the fence. And we talk about what a culture of content creation looks like at a corporate law firm and how corporate law firms should handle breaking news regarding legal developments. This interview came at content marketing and thought leadership marketing from a different angle because with Rich being in a C-suite role, we can kind of see from the top down how law firms can build cultures of content creation and create systems for consistently creating content. In this first clip from my conversation with Rich discusses the culture of testing without fearing failure and how it's not like a legal argument that you have freedom to try something and freedom to fail.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes conceptually we'll come up with an idea and we'll kick it around and we'll spend a lot of time on it and nothing will come of it because we realize there's not the momentum there. Maybe we don't have the right people in the right roles at the right time with the right skill sets, or the people who do have the skill sets just don't have the time or initiative or interest to take it on. Or we'll launch a project, a publication initiative, or a new piece of content, and we want to make it a regular feature. And we look at the analytics and it's just not getting any traction. We're not seeing people read it. We're not getting good anecdotal feedback. We don't really get a lot of investment from our attorneys in the firm who aren't excited about contributing to it. And so we just, we dismiss it and it's done. And that, again, when I think about the luxury I have of time to be able to spend foresight thinking of things, I also have the luxury of not necessarily, I don't worry about getting sued for malpractice anymore, right? I mean, when you're practicing attorney, sometimes your creative juice gets squashed because you don't want to do anything out of the ordinary, because out of the ordinary can get you sued, right? Out of the ordinary can make you lose a case. Hey, the way you ran this case, the way your partner ran the case 20 years ago worked. So why do it differently? And if you do it differently, the client might get pissed off at you if they lose the case, right? Or you're going to try something wacky and new, and if it fails, man, that could be a malpractice lawsuit. And so writing and content creation and what we do, it gives a lot of freedom, not only to me, but our attorneys to try something. And maybe you're going to fail, and it's more like the corporate world where you got to have a lot of good ideas you got to have a lot of bad ideas to have a good idea. Attorneys aren't really trained that way, right? Attorneys are trained to play it safe, right down the middle, fastballs right down the middle of the plate, we're not messing around with new funky things. And I have the luxury of being able to try new stuff.
It's funny when you talk about failure in marketing and business development, like what is failure? If something doesn't land with the audience, it's not like they're going to hold a grudge. It just doesn't land and they move on. They barely pay attention to it. So you can fail with an initiative and no one's going to hold a grudge because no one's going to remember that it didn't land. They've moved on already. So I think it's an interesting aspect of marketing, especially when it comes to content marketing. When you try different things, if they don't work out, then who cares? Maybe you've lost some time, you lost some money perhaps, but no one's going to hold it against you. No one's going to care if you change tactics or strategies midstream. You don't have to fear failure in that context like you might if you lost a legal argument and caused some negative impact on your clients. In the second clip from Rich's episode, he talks about writing compelling content to stand out from the crowd and above the noise, and how writing compelling content includes taking a position in that content.
A lot of the drafts I get are very much like that. Not only in terms of form, the Iraq, whatever, but also in terms of, you've read it and I'm bored while reading it and editing it, right? So how do you liven it up? And I'm not talking about, you also have to make sure you don't fall way to the other side of the sky is falling mentality. If you write every single piece as this is the most incredible thing, and a significant development, and if you don't alter your handbook immediately, you're going to get, we can't go that route every single time too. Or with the proposed laws, goodness, every bill passed by the House or proposed by the House, if we wrote a klaxon blaring alert every time the House passed a new law that would impact employers, people would stop reading our stuff. So what I have to do is find that balance, right? We have this really great series I'm really proud of right now. We're about to put out our 4th edition of it. We've done it every month so far this year, called FP Forecast, where we ask different leaders and practice groups and industry teams to take a look at these big picture things. What do you expect your clients to do? If you're advising a general counsel who's about to run into their board meeting and give the board a forecast about what to expect in the next year so that the company can position itself, what would you say about these areas? And I have to, it's almost like I'm coaching them. Like, don't be afraid to take a position. Like, take that. They'll use some of that language. We may see this. Like, no, say you're going to see a litigation explosion. You forecast it. That's what you think. That's what they're wanting to hear from you. So making those bold statements sometimes are harder for attorneys because, again, we as attorneys are trained to play everything safe and include all this wiggle room. And a list of things includes this, which includes but not limited to, and all that catch-all language of and any other ideas that we may not have listed here. And content, to make good creative, compelling content, we need to take position sometimes. And I try to walk that fence with them and get them to take that extra bold step. But sometimes attorneys just don't want to do it. So it's our job to recognize when to push and when to let it lie.
I can't stress this enough. There is so much bland content put out there by corporate law firms, so much content that straddles the fence, doesn't take a position. You've got to be memorable. Like Jim Hacking and his enemies at the USCIS, you've got to take a stand and have a voice. Otherwise, you're going to fade into the void and be just like every other competitor and make it difficult for your clients and referral sources to naturally be attracted to you based on what you're saying and the positions that you're taking. Our third and final clip from Rich's episode is the system he's got for identifying topics and getting lawyers to write about those topics.
It's an interesting combination between us identifying topics to write about and folks writing about them on their own. I'm proud of the fact that we've created an incredible culture in the firm in the last 5 years where attorneys don't need to be spurred by me to be able to write stuff. They feel, I don't have to reach out and beg them. There are a lot of folks who on their own initiative identify topics and recognize the value that writing is going to give to them, and therefore just spontaneously offer to write things. So that happens a lot. Where the magic really happens, though, is we very intentionally, in our firm's vision statements years ago, we really recognized that our practice areas and our industry teams are not just collections of people who happen to handle wage and hour matters or some people who represent healthcare clients, that these need to be active engines of the firm in terms of bolstering our strength, collecting our knowledge and our expertise in these areas, but also from a marketing perspective, create content that relates to these areas and fields. So a lot of where the magic happens is me coordinating with all the leaders of our practice groups and industry teams. So if we identify this morning, let's say a wage and hour matter, I'll reach out to the 2 co-chairs of our team and say, this looks like an interesting topic, let's talk about it. They, because they're with their groups on a daily basis, know that an associate in New Jersey, let's say, has just recently identified that they want to write about something or they want to be more involved. Or we have somebody who's a former attorney in the Department of Labor who handled these kinds of matters when they were there. Let's bring him in. Or we're a former official for the Department of Labor who used to handle this sort of stuff as well in her day. So let's bring her involved. So they know the people who might be brought in well. And then sometimes I have to do the big cattle call, right? I have to send the all associate email or the all group email saying, hey, we're looking for somebody in this time frame to write on this topic. What do you think? And we'll identify new people or people who have time and availability. So a lot of it stems from sort of coordinating through people. I couldn't just do it all myself, or else I'd be sending all attorney emails on a daily basis, and people would want to strangle me rather than work with me. And our attorneys, our associates, and our partners, they have no expectation ever of writing for the firm. But I'm proud to say that last year, of our about 500 attorney headcount, I think the last number I saw was that in 2021, we had 240 attorneys who contributed to content at some point. So about half of our attorneys wrote at least one piece of content, many of whom wrote multiple pieces.
I realize few law firms are going to have a chief content officer like Rich, but marketing or business development folks, or lawyers at firms without marketing and BD folks, should spend a few minutes thinking about how they would employ systems in order to more effectively and efficiently produce content. Systems for determining what topics to write about, systems for determining who at the firm will be writing these particular pieces of content, and the process for getting it out of the lawyer's hands and then distributed to wherever that content will be published. In terms of takeaways from Rich's episode, I think number one, there is clearly value to having someone at a law firm whose job it is to oversee content creation. You can just hear in how he's talking about content marketing and thought leadership marketing and the processes and procedures. He just is on top of things, and that allows the firm to be a prolific content creator and reach its target audiences like its clients and referral sources more consistently and more frequently. Another takeaway is having a culture of experimentation, not being afraid to fail, but being enthused about testing and being excited about testing something once or twice. And if it takes off, great. If it doesn't, if it lands with a thud, then you move on. You move on to some other tactic, some other form of content, no big deal. But you don't know what the potential for a new idea could be unless you give that new idea a chance to take flight and see how the market reacts to that idea. Another takeaway from Rich's episode is that you've got to stand out from the noise by creating content with an edge. You can't just straddle the fence. You've got to have an edge, and an edge could just be an opinion. An edge could be taking a stand and saying that the DOJ or the SEC or somebody overreached, or a judge didn't consider this key fact or this key legal argument. It's okay to have a little bit of an edge because you've got to stand out from the crowd. Otherwise, your content will blend in with everyone else's. You won't be seen as any different, and you're not going to be able to get the edge on your competitors and peer firms because you appear to be the same as them. And finally, the last takeaway from Rich's episode is it is nice to have systems and processes for identifying topics and figuring out who is next up in the batting order to write about those topics. When you systematize this content creation, when you create processes for how content will be created, you can do it consistently and you could do it more frequently because everyone understands how the process will work. No one is left guessing, and they all know their role and how often or how frequent they will need to be participating in the process. So there you have it for this episode of the Legally Contented Lowdown. We covered a lot of ground here. Most of it, I think, was about branding. I think the first 4 episodes, Mitch Jackson, Sawyer, Laura Frederick, and Jim Hacking, we were focused on personal branding and their own unique ways of getting their personal brand out there. And then we ended with Rich Meneghello talking a little bit more about law firm branding and how a law firm can brand itself through consistent content creation. If you want to hear the full versions of the 5 episodes that I covered in this episode, you can check them out through our podcast feed. We'd love to hear your feedback on this episode as well as our other episodes. We would appreciate any reviews that you leave us on your favorite podcast player. And finally, we'd love to hear from you if you've got candidates for guests that are doing big things with their content marketing or their thought leadership marketing efforts in the legal industry. Thanks again for tuning into this episode of Legally Contented. We'll talk again soon.